The envelope came home, and I held my breath as I opened it. It was just as I feared, another birthday party invitation. But then the miraculous words of freedom: please, no gifts. Somehow gift giving, whether for a family member, close friend, or a child's classmate whose name I just learned, is always a seemingly difficult task for me. There are so many considerations, and it feels like I never quite get it all right. A colleague of mine from HUC, Rabbi Max Miller, wrote a few years back about gift giving, expressing a similar struggle. And he quotes a famous economist who had figured out the perfect gift, which is in fact, according to a bunch of algorithms, cold hard cash. Though he continues saying, "I don't know of many people who have rosy-eyed memories about that time they received a $36 check for their birthday." Many years ago, pastor and counselor Gary Chapman published a fairly well-known book, The 5 Love Languages. He gives a reason behind why, for some of us, gift-giving is daunting and others love it. His basic premise is that just as if a couple spoke and understood different languages, no one would be surprised that they frequently were frustrated at misunderstandings in simple conversations, let alone in significant decision-making. And the same is true for how we communicate love. Different languages exist. Gift-giving, according to Chapman, joins quality time, acts of service, words of affirmation, and physical touch as the 5 languages in which we humans express love and affection to one another. We each may have a different dominant love language, and perhaps one we like to use for showing affection and one for which we receive it. Turns out Rabbi Max Miller and I are not alone in finding the birthday gift-giving challenging. Rather, we speak other love languages. While Chapman's work focuses on romantic couples, the concept applies in any interpersonal relationship. Instead of date nights and romantic gestures, we might be talking about compliments, trinkets, and social outings as more meaningful expressions of love and affection within our familial, platonic, and collegial relationships. And there are so many worthy questions about the application of these different love languages in our lives. But when I saw the question posed about God, namely, what is God's preferred love language, I couldn't resist trying to find an answer. I found more attempts to answer this question than I expected, and unsurprisingly, they didn't all have the same answer. It is easy to list examples historically and in our own times for all 5 of the love languages in our relationship with God. We use words of affirmation every time we say, Baruch Atah Adonai. We spend quality time with God every time we come here to services or engage in Jewish rituals. God made many gifts for us, and we as Jews started with sacrifices and moved to thanking God for all the gifts in our prayer services. Acts of service, I think, needs no additional explanation. And while physical touch is a little more difficult with an intangible being, we speak of feeling God's presence, of wearing a talit or touching the Western Wall. And we could list many more. And we could argue that the sacrifices in the temple were more endearing to God than our prayer services, or perhaps Tikkun Olam takes the cake. And while I could argue that I feel God's love in more ways in some of the categories than others, in many, many pages and articles I read, I didn't find a compelling argument for any of the 5 as God's preference. Some of the authors I looked at resolved this by trying to say that God must have God's own love language, different from our human ones. Many of the Christian authors, I found this part interesting, cited from the book of John, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." They cited obedience as God's love language. Yet I found it really interesting that the Jewish sources, which often focus on legal and ethical imperatives, our mitzvot and our midot, did not make the same argument. So it made me wonder, is obedience to mitzvot and to our midot, our Jewish values, how God wants us to show love to the divine? And so I looked through the Torah, and I found about 40 instances of the Hebrew root aleph he vet for love. You might know it as ahava, the noun. 40 times in the entire Torah. Possible I missed a couple. But that's not so many. There's a lot of words in the Torah. And I found that about a third of those instances described familial relationships, the bulk of them mentioning Jacob's love and preference of Rachel over Leah, and then Jacob loving and favoring Joseph over his other children. However, in the book of Genesis, at an equal number of mentions with the root for love was Isaac loving a good, meaty stew. Maybe God's like cholent. But somehow Isaac and his love of stew gets as many mentions as some of the deepest bonds between people we have in the Bible. The root barely appears again until we get to Deuteronomy, where we find more than half the uses. And almost none of them refer to person-to-person love, but to God and the people of Israel. There are 18 that I found, chai, where God is talking about the people and loving the people, or Moses is reminding the Israelites to love God. But none of them were in that formulation, if you love me, then you're going to do this. They were all in verses where loving God as a commandment fell in parallel to following God's ways, cleaving to God, revering God, and more. Love seems related, but separate from our obedience to our laws and practices. And this makes sense. One can be obedient to authority who hasn't spent hours at the BMV to renew their license, and I don't think any of us love the BMV. We can be obedient to a supervisor out of fear of consequences rather than affection to that person. And despite Judaism's historic emphasis on commandedness and living by halakha, I don't think our obedience is how God wants us to show love, because that implies it is conditional. It seems to me that only after some of our worst biblical mistakes, times when we might feel we'd be disowned as a people, think like the golden calf, that our biblical text starts talking about God's love more. The longer we are in relationship with God in the Torah, the more the text mentions love. Far from two young kids infatuated with one another, growing apart as the emotional intensity fades, Israel seemingly starts more distant and grows closer to God through the covenant and our historical experiences together. As our relationship with God got more real through those trials and tribulations, the love deepens. And in sifting through all these texts, trying to prove that God wants to receive love or have us feel God's love in a certain way, what emerged is that God, unlike humans, gives and receives love in all these different ways that can speak to anyone. Whereas Chapman at the end has us trying to figure out how to change our behavior to give or receive love in ways that match our loved ones' preferences, God does not ask us to change to fit God's preferences. God takes our love as we are, no conscious adaptation needed. And I think that is the piece that Chapman missed. Knowing about someone's communication preferences, whether love or any other emotion or subject, helps us understand and be understood as intended. Recently, someone online said that it's amazing how we so easily and readily teach children that say, when a cat runs away from you, oh, it just wants some space. That's how cats can be. And yet we often ask people who maybe prefer more personal space to just be more comfortable in group settings. A person that gets easily excited and makes loud noises should be able to sit quietly, but the dog alerting to a guest coming to the door is often rewarded. It seems we have an easier time accepting pet behavior and pets for who they are now, and we ask ourselves or others around us to change. The same is true with our love languages. I'll tell you, my cats have never said, "I love you" to me. They've brought me gifts I didn't want. They really like spending quality time with me at 2 a.m. And they certainly enjoy the acts of service we provide for them. But I would never question that they don't appreciate us, even as much as I might want slightly different signs of affection from them. Can't the same be true with humans? Some may never say, "I love you" enough, but they speak in other categories. Where one person might say, "I didn't think my parent loved me because they never said it," when they look back, they talk about how that parent would go out and do anything they needed. That's an act of service, not a word. Sometimes we communicate our love with grand gestures like parted seas, and other times in little mundane ways. Love is about continued, genuine expressions of connection over time. An expensive gift does not make up for harm caused, but acts of genuine love can. Genuine love is about the impact on the other. We aren't looking for something that we gain in return. God demonstrates this kind of love, and I believe that is what God wants from us, to give one another that same unconditional love in the languages that are most genuine to ourselves, to each other. In our prayer services, we offer a blessing that calls upon God as the one who loves Israel. The shorter version, recited earlier tonight, Ahavat Olam, can be translated, that title, as enduring love. It has a longer form, Ahavat Rabbah, abundant love, in the morning. Long ago, when the liturgy was being fixed, we had multiple versions of these prayers, and the liturgist decided to keep both. And as I was looking through our liturgy, it dawned on me, when we start our day, we start with abundant love. We wake up renewed. We have lots of spoons to give. But in the evening, when perhaps we have less energy, when we have more worries, when darkness, literal or metaphoric, starts settling upon us, we need enduring love. We need Ahavat Olam. We need that deeper love that fills us, that sustains us, to bring us to morning's light. These don't need to be extravagant, but these need to be thoughtful. We need love. We need consistent reminders of appreciation given freely to ensure that others can go through the darkness and know that they are not alone. Rosh Hashanah calls us to put more love into the world. The way to feel more loved is to practice giving love genuinely and freely to others. The way to feel more loved is to open our hearts to all the love languages and attune ourselves to messages that maybe we've been missing all along. During the storms of life's trials and tribulations, Ahavat Olam, deep, enduring love, will carry us through. This year, may you find love. May you find Ahavat Rabbah, abundant love, through your attunement to love languages. And may you find Ahavat Olam, enduring love, through expressions of love around you. Blessed are you, God, who loves Israel, and blessed are we when we share your love with the world.